In the vastness of the galaxy, humanity was nothing more than an afterthought. For centuries, the alien races, powerful and ancient, had laughed at Earth and its people. The idea that humans could one day rise to challenge them was absurd. They were nothing more than a primitive species, struggling to survive on a small, insignificant planet. The great galactic empires had long dismissed Earth as a place of no importance, a backwater world full of weak, unrefined creatures. But that didn't matter to the humans who lived on Earth. To them, their planet was everything. It was their home, their legacy, and their future. Yet the laughter of the aliens echoed throughout the stars, growing louder with every passing year. It seemed as though the galaxy had forgotten about the potential of humanity, seeing only weakness, only chaos, and only fragility. One day, however, everything changed. Far away from the bustling cities and the bustling life of Earth, a small group of scientists had stumbled upon something that would alter the course of history. These researchers were not from any known government or military, but rather a group of passionate individuals united by their curiosity. They worked in secret, knowing the dangers that came with investigating things that were not meant to be uncovered. While exploring a remote part of the Earth's surface, the scientists discovered something ancient, buried deep beneath layers of rock and time. Hidden for centuries, lay a strange, alien artifact. At first, it seemed nothing more than a piece of forgotten debris, an odd relic left behind by an ancient civilization. Yet there was something about it that felt alive, something that whispered in the minds of those who came too close. It was as though the artifact itself was waiting for someone to awaken it. The scientists were cautious at first, unsure of what they had found. As they began to study the object, they realized it was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. It wasn't made from materials known to Earth. Its surface was smooth and shimmering, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It felt powerful, and yet strangely calming. They could not understand its purpose, but one thing was clear. This artifact was old, far older than any human civilization. After months of careful examination, one of the lead scientists, Dr. Elaine Carter, discovered an inscription on the artifact's surface. It was written in a language none of them recognized. The symbols were complex, each one flowing into the next in a way that felt unnatural, as if the letters themselves were alive. The language seemed both ancient and strangely modern, a bridge between the past and the present. For weeks, they tried to decode the symbols, and in doing so, they discovered something incredible. The inscription was a form of communication. The artifact was not just a relic, it was a message. But the language it was written in was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was not a language that had existed on Earth, or any known language in the galaxy. It was something older, far older. The breakthrough came when Dr. Carter realized that the language had a rhythm, a pattern that resonated with certain frequencies in the environment. She had a hunch that this language, if spoken, might unlock something far beyond the scientific understanding of her time. But there was a warning in the inscription, too. Those who speak the language shall awaken what was meant to remain dormant. Despite the warning, Dr. Carter and her team were eager to find out what would happen if they spoke the words. They didn't understand the full implications of their actions. They simply believed that this language was a key to unlocking knowledge, to understanding a lost history of the universe. They believed it would elevate humanity to the stars, offering them a place among the powerful civilizations of the galaxy. As Dr. Carter spoke the first words aloud, a strange sensation filled the room. The air grew thicker, heavier. A distant rumble could be felt beneath the ground. It was as if the Earth itself had reacted to the language, awakening from a long slumber. The scientists felt it too, the sensation that something was happening, something vast and terrifying. But it wasn't just Earth that was reacting. Something far larger, far more ancient, was responding. The galactic empires, millions of light years away, had been watching Earth. They had observed its slow rise, its small steps into the cosmos. But they never expected humanity to pose a threat. After all, humans were nothing more than weak, fragile creatures. Yet, as soon as Dr. Carter spoke those forbidden words, the first stirrings of something greater were felt across the galaxy. A deep, ancient fear spread like wildfire among the alien races. They had always mocked humanity, believing them to be insignificant. But now, they were beginning to realize the truth. Something had awakened. As the aliens realized that humanity had tapped into something they should never have touched, panic began to spread. The peaceful alliances that had once been confident in their superiority now began to question everything. What were humans capable of? What had they just unlocked? The galaxy was not as safe as it once seemed. In the shadows of the universe, there were those who feared this moment, those who had kept their secrets hidden for millennia. And now, humanity had stumbled upon the one thing that could change everything. The laughter of the aliens had faded. The mocking tones were gone. The universe was about to see Earth and its people in a new light. The game had changed, and humanity had just set the stage for a confrontation that none of the galactic empires were prepared for. The moment Dr. Carter spoke the final word of the ancient language, a sudden silence fell over the room. For a long moment, no one moved. The air felt thick, almost alive, and a sense of foreboding filled the room. The scientists stood frozen, staring at the artifact that now seemed to pulse with an inner light. It was as though something had been awakened, something ancient, something powerful. Then the ground trembled beneath them. It started as a low rumble, like a distant earthquake, and quickly grew stronger. The walls of the lab shook, and the lights flickered. A few of the scientists gasped, gripping the nearest surface for support. Dr. Carter's heart raced in her chest. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. She had expected a discovery, but nothing like this. "We need to get out of here," one of the junior researchers, Brian, whispered. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with fear. But Dr. Carter couldn't move. Her mind was racing. This was what they had wanted, an answer, a revelation. But had they really known what they were unlocking? As the tremors intensified, a soft, eerie hum began to fill the room, vibrating the air in a strange harmony. It was not a sound they could understand, yet it felt as though it spoke to their very souls. For a brief moment, Dr. Carter thought she heard words, foreign and indecipherable, but they seemed to echo deep within her mind, as if the language was reaching out to her directly. Suddenly, a sharp flash of light exploded from the artifact, blinding everyone in the room. The light pulsated, bright and intense, growing brighter until it filled every corner of the lab. Then, with a final blinding flare, the light vanished. Everything went still. For a long moment, no one dared to speak. The room was silent, save for the faint hum that still lingered in the air. The artifact, now dark and still, seemed to return to its previous inert state. The shaking had stopped. The lights in the lab flickered back on. "What just happened?" Brian's voice trembled. Dr. Carter stood motionless, staring at the artifact. Her mind struggled to process what had just occurred. They had awoken something that had been dormant for centuries. But the question that lingered in her mind was, why? Before she could answer Brian, a warning flashed across the screens in the lab. It was a distress signal, one that had been received from the farthest reaches of space. "We're not alone," Dr. Carter muttered. "This is not just about Earth anymore." The signal was coming from a distant part of the galaxy, a part of space known only to the most ancient civilizations. For the first time, humanity had received a transmission from that faraway sector, and the message was unmistakable. "The forbidden language has been spoken." The message sent a chill through Dr. Carter. She wasn't sure who had sent it, but one thing was clear. The galaxy had just learned what Earth had unlocked. And that was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, things were beginning to shift. In the high councils of the ancient alien races, the news of Earth's discovery had sent shockwaves of fear throughout their ranks. They had laughed at humanity for centuries, but now they were questioning everything. The once hidden language, believed to be a relic of an extinct race, had been unlocked by humans. What did this mean for their future? What did it mean for the future of the galaxy? The galaxy's most powerful factions, the ones who had long ruled the stars with an iron fist, were now on high alert. The language spoken by Dr. Carter had been buried for a reason. It was a weapon, a tool of unimaginable power, and it was feared by all who had known its existence. No one had expected humanity to stumble upon it, least of all the aliens who had once laughed at them. The higher-ups in these empires immediately convened to discuss the implications of Earth's discovery. Their fear wasn't just about the knowledge itself. It was about the potential of humans. The aliens knew that humans had a gift, one that was unlike anything they had ever seen. It wasn't just their ability to survive in hostile environments or their ingenuity. It was their adaptability, their capacity to learn, to evolve. Humans had the potential to change everything. Back on Earth, as the scientists pieced together what had just happened, Dr. Carter's team began to realize the full extent of their discovery. They had unknowingly tapped into a well of ancient knowledge, a force that had been sealed away to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. The language they had spoken was more than just a form of communication. It was a key, a weapon, and a message from a forgotten time. But as they continued to study the artifact, they began to notice something else, something that hadn't been there before. There were faint symbols appearing on its surface, symbols that hadn't been there when they first discovered it. The inscription seemed to change, shifting as if it were alive, reacting to their presence. "Look at this," one of the researchers, Jenna, said. She pointed to the new symbols appearing on the artifact's surface. This wasn't here before. Dr. Carter stepped forward, her heart pounding. The symbols were unfamiliar, but the fear that had begun to build in her chest intensified. Whatever this was, whatever they had awakened, it was far more than they could have imagined. "We need to prepare," Dr. Carter said, her voice trembling but resolute. "This isn't just about us anymore. The galaxy is watching." Far above Earth, in the heart of a vast alien empire, the message had been received, and the response was swift. The ancient beings who had once feared this language were now preparing for a confrontation that would determine the fate of Earth and the future of the galaxy. The laughter of the aliens had stopped, but their fear was just beginning. As days passed, the world watched with bated breath. Dr. Carter and her team continued to study the artifact, which was now a global point of focus. Its influence spread far beyond the scientific community. News outlets broadcasted reports of the mysterious discovery, fueling curiosity, fear, and hope. Governments and military leaders around the world had taken notice, but Dr. Carter remained adamant. There was more to the artifact than anyone could see. In the lab, the team was no closer to understanding the full implications of the discovery. Every day, new symbols and patterns appeared on the artifact's surface. The language they had unlocked wasn't just a series of words. It was a puzzle. And the more they studied it, the more they realized how little they truly understood. Dr. Carter's obsession with the artifact grew. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. But with each new discovery, the more she felt an unshakable dread settle in her chest. The knowledge they had unlocked was not something that had been buried for centuries. It had been hidden for a reason. Whatever ancient civilization had created this language had understood the danger it posed. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. As Dr. Carter was running another test, the artifact began to hum. It was a soft sound at first, barely audible, but it soon grew louder. The entire room vibrated with it. The walls shook and the lights flickered. It felt as though the artifact was alive, its energy pulsing with power. The symbols on its surface twisted and turned, creating new patterns that seemed to move like liquid. The air grew heavy, and the team began to panic. "What's happening?" One of the researchers, Leo, shouted as he grabbed the nearest console to steady himself. I don't know," Dr. Carter said, her voice tight with fear. "This wasn't supposed to happen. We need to shut it down." But it was too late. The artifact's hum intensified, filling the room with an almost unbearable pressure. And then, without warning, the artifact erupted with light. Bright, blinding light. Dr. Carter shielded her eyes, but the intensity was so great that even the palm of her hand couldn't block it. The air around them crackled with energy, and the room seemed to warp. She could hear nothing but the ringing hum that now overwhelmed her senses. It felt like the artifact was calling out, reaching for something, someone. And then, as quickly as it had started, the light faded. The hum stopped. Silence filled the room. Dr. Carter blinked, struggling to make sense of what had just happened. Her head throbbed with the aftermath of the intense energy. She looked around at the team. They were all wide-eyed, some shaking, others gasping for breath. That was unlike anything we've ever experienced, Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Carter's gaze returned to the artifact. It was silent again, still, like it had been when they first found it. But she knew something had changed. She could feel it. She stepped forward, cautiously placing her hand on the surface of the artifact. A pulse of energy shot through her fingertips, and the symbols shifted once again. But this time, they didn't form the familiar patterns they had come to recognize. These symbols were new, more complex, and as she stared at them, her mind began to race. In that moment, she realized something profound. The artifact wasn't just a relic from an ancient civilization. It was a message from the ancestors of the very beings who had laughed at humanity. A warning, perhaps, a call for help, even. This is bigger than we thought," Dr. Carter murmured, her voice trembling with realization. But even as she spoke, she heard a sound from the far side of the room. A faint whirring noise, followed by a soft thud. It was coming from the monitoring equipment. She turned quickly, only to see the screens flashing with rapid intensity. "We've received another transmission," one of the junior scientists, Anna, shouted from the control panel. She turned toward Dr. Carter. "It's from the galaxy. It's from them." Dr. Carter's heart skipped a beat. Them, the beings who had once laughed at humans, dismissing them as primitive, were now watching them with intensity. The transmission had a single word displayed across the screen. "Return." For a moment, no one moved. The weight of that one word settled over the team like a dark cloud. The message was clear. The ancient language was no accident. It was a summons. The time had come. The aliens who had once ridiculed humanity now sought something, perhaps a power, or a secret, locked within the language they had uncovered. "They want us to return the language," Dr. Carter said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But why? And to whom?" The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Every scientist in the room understood the gravity of the situation. The message had been sent, an undeniable signal from the stars. And the aliens were ready for humanity to make their next move. Dr. Carter knew that this was no longer just about discovery. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity was at the center of it all. But there were forces at play that they couldn't begin to comprehend, forces that had been waiting for this moment for eons. As the team began to prepare for the next steps, Dr. Carter felt a deep unease. Whatever lay ahead, the future of humanity would never be the same. The room was filled with tension as Dr. Carter stared at the screen. The single word, "return," glowed ominously in front of them. Her team sat in a stunned silence, their faces pale with confusion and fear. The suddenness of the transmission from the galaxy, its urgency, was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Whatever they had unlocked with the artifact, it was clear now. Humanity had just opened a door to a galaxy that had long forgotten them. "What does this mean?" Anna, the junior scientist, asked, her voice shaking. She stood at the control panel, eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't know," Dr. Carter admitted, her voice tight with unease. "But we have to find out." For weeks, they had carefully deciphered the ancient language embedded in the artifact. They had believed that it was a relic from a long-forgotten civilization, nothing more than a puzzle to solve. But the transmission, the word return, made it clear. The stakes were far higher than they could have imagined. The screen flickered again, as if trying to push them further. Dr. Carter leaned in, her hands trembling as she typed commands into the console. The word return expanded into a new string of symbols, more intricate than before. These were words. They were instructions. The complexity of the message sent shivers down her spine. Each symbol felt like a part of an ancient puzzle, one that had been waiting for someone to finally complete it. Dr. Carter, Leo, one of the senior researchers, spoke up from behind her. "We need to be careful. This is not just some message. It's a warning." The group fell silent, all eyes turning toward him. Leo's tone was heavy, filled with caution. The eerie silence aboard the ship hung thick in the air as Dr. Carter and her crew prepared for the next stage of their journey. The strange object in front of them had not only defied their understanding of technology, but it seemed to pulse with an ancient power, like a slumbering giant waiting to awaken. No one knew what would happen next, but everyone felt the heavy weight of uncertainty bearing down on them. The crew was tense, their nerves taut, as the ship slowly drew closer to the massive structure. Its surface shimmered and changed shape, flickering as though it had a life of its own. The energy readings were off the charts, impossible to interpret, and yet they felt a pull toward it, as if it were calling them in. "Captain, the object. It's starting to respond." Leo's voice crackled through the comms. "The energy levels are spiking rapidly. We need to be careful." Dr. Carter nodded solemnly, her gaze fixed on the strange artifact. It was now clear that this was no ordinary structure, but something much more significant. It was ancient, perhaps older than anything humanity had ever encountered, and it was far beyond the technology of the human race. The question remained, why had it waited so long to reveal itself? "Prepare for every possible outcome," Dr. Carter said, her voice steady. "We have no idea what we're dealing with, but this could be the discovery of a lifetime." As the ship moved closer, the entire crew was on edge. They were no longer sure whether they were entering a place of knowledge or danger. They had crossed the threshold into the unknown. And now, there was no turning back. Whatever lay ahead, humanity's fate would be tied to it. Then, without warning, the object began to hum, a deep resonance that vibrated through the entire ship. The crew felt it in their bones, a strange, unsettling sensation. The ship's hull groaned in response, as though it too was being drawn into the pulse of energy. "Brace for impact," Dr. Carter ordered, gripping the edge of her console. The entire crew scrambled, each preparing for the unknown. Their hearts raced as the ship began to tremble under the force of the energy coming from the object. Suddenly, the ship's exterior lights flickered out, plunging the bridge into complete darkness. Panic spread through the crew as the only light left was the faint glow emanating from the object ahead. It was as if the universe itself had gone silent, holding its breath in anticipation. Then, as quickly as the power had gone out, the lights flickered back on. But something was different. The screens came to life, but now they displayed symbols no one on board recognized, glowing shapes and glyphs that seemed to pulse with an ancient rhythm. "Is that some kind of language?" Anna whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Carter leaned in, her eyes scanning the symbols. "It appears to be a form of writing, one that we've never seen before. This could be the key to everything we've been looking for. This might be the lost knowledge of an entire civilization." The crew watched in awe as the symbols on the screen shifted and rearranged themselves, forming complex patterns. It was as though the object was communicating with them, revealing something they were not yet ready to understand. The energy readings continued to spike, and the ship began to hum in sync with the mysterious energy. Then, without warning, a voice echoed through the ship, deep and resonant, a language no human ear had ever heard before. The crew froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The voice was ancient, But its tone was unmistakable, ominous and powerful, like something that had been waiting to speak for millennia. "We are the keepers," the voice reverberated. "You are not welcome." The words felt like a weight pressing down on the crew. Dr. Carter's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. The transmission, this voice, it was a warning, and it was clear. Whoever or whatever this was, they did not want humanity here. But there was more at play than just a threat. The crew had come this far. And now, they had to push forward. The voice may have spoken of warnings, but Dr. Carter knew there was no going back. Humanity had stumbled upon something far greater than anything they had ever imagined, and the discovery of this ancient civilization was too important to ignore. "We need to respond," Dr. Carter said, her voice shaking with urgency. "We have to communicate with it. Whatever it is, we need to prove we're not a threat." But even as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just an ancient civilization. This object, this voice, it felt alive, almost as if it had been waiting for them, testing them. Another pulse of energy rippled through the ship, and the crew felt it once more in their bones. The lights dimmed again, and the temperature dropped. A low hum resonated in the background, almost like a heartbeat. "Captain," Leo called, his voice filled with awe and concern. It's reacting to us. It knows we're here. I don't think we're the first to come across this." Dr. Carter's eyes narrowed. It was then that she realized the truth. They had walked into a trap. But it was a trap that held the key to humanity's future. And now, they had no choice but to face whatever consequences came with that discovery. The ship's systems were now under full control of the energy field. The crew had no control over the ship's movements, and they were helpless in the face of this ancient power. Yet, amid the uncertainty, Dr. Carter knew one thing for sure. Humanity had just opened a door that could never be closed again. The awakening had begun. The crew sat in stunned silence, their eyes glued to the screens in front of them. The voice had spoken, and now they were caught in its web. The ship's systems were no longer under their control. It was as if they had entered a new realm entirely, one where their actions had no meaning. Dr. Carter sat in her captain's chair, her mind racing. What had they awakened? What had they set into motion? "Captain, the ship's systems are shutting down one by one," Leo reported, his voice tight with fear. "This isn't like anything we've seen before. It's not just the systems. It's like the whole ship is being reprogrammed." Dr. Carter stared at the control panel, helpless. "What are we supposed to do, Leo? We can't even communicate with it. We're in the dark here." The pulse of energy from the artifact grew stronger, as if it was feeding off the ship's power. The walls trembled, and the lights flickered violently. Suddenly, the ship began moving of its own accord, gliding toward the ancient object that had called them here. "We have to stay calm," Dr. Carter said, her voice firm, but shaking. "Whatever happens, we need to stay focused. We can't let it control us." As the ship moved closer to the object, something strange began to happen. The symbols on the screen shifted, and new, unrecognizable patterns appeared. The alien language flashed across the display like lightning, its meaning still hidden from them. Without warning, the ship came to a halt, inches away from the alien artifact. The crew held their breath, watching in awe and fear. The artifact began to glow, the energy levels now so intense that they could feel it pulsing through the very air around them. The entire ship seemed to hum in tune with it, as though they were part of something much greater than themselves. Then the voice returned, louder, deeper, more powerful than before. "You have awakened the keepers," it intoned. "You have crossed the threshold of the ancient world. You seek knowledge, but you do not yet understand the cost." The crew exchanged nervous glances. They had only come here seeking answers, not to unleash a force they couldn't control. "What do you want from us?" Dr. Carter demanded, standing up, her voice filled with defiance. "We didn't come here to be your enemies. We just want to learn." The voice seemed to pause, as if considering her words. Then it spoke again, this time softer, almost sorrowful. As the ship drew closer to the dark zone, the instruments started to malfunction. Static buzzed on the screens, and the ship's navigation system flickered erratically. "Is this normal?" Anna asked, her voice laced with concern as she watched the flickering console. "No," Dr. Carter replied, her brow furrowing. "Something's blocking our signals. We've crossed into a part of space that shouldn't exist." The atmosphere on the bridge grew tense. Everyone on board was now acutely aware of the danger they were facing. They had no idea what lay beyond the veil of darkness ahead. And yet, despite the risk, they couldn't turn back. The transmission had made it clear. They had to go further, deeper into the abyss. "We need to prepare for whatever comes next," Dr. Carter said, her voice calm but firm. "Keep monitoring all systems. I don't know what we'll find, but we must be ready." As they moved deeper into the darkness, the stars around them seemed to vanish. The ship's lights dimmed in the heavy shadow that surrounded them. It was as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, the ship lurched, throwing everyone off balance. The alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to regain control. Dr. Carter gripped the armrest of her seat, trying to steady herself. The ship's external sensors went wild, detecting something massive ahead, something that wasn't supposed to exist in this part of space. "What is that?" Leo asked, pointing to the main screen. On the display, a massive object appeared out of the darkness, its shape indistinguishable. It was enormous, much larger than any ship they had ever encountered. But it was covered in shadows, as though the light itself had been swallowed by its presence. The sensors couldn't even identify it. It was as if it was both there and not there at the same time, an anomaly that defied everything they knew about physics. "Is that a ship?" Anna asked, her voice filled with awe and fear. "I don't think so," Dr. Carter said, her heart racing. "It doesn't match any known design. This could be the ancient civilization we've been searching for, or something even older." As they approached the mysterious object, a strange energy pulse washed over the ship, temporarily shutting down all systems. The crew gasped in unison as the ship fell silent, its systems frozen in place. It was as though they had crossed the threshold, and now they were at the mercy of whatever lay beyond. "Get the auxiliary power online," Dr. Carter ordered, her voice sharp with urgency. But it was too late. The pulse had already affected them. The systems began to reboot, but they were stuck in this vast, impenetrable void. Seconds felt like hours as the crew worked frantically to restore power. Dr. Carter's mind raced. The dark shape ahead was unlike anything they had encountered. It was a relic, an ancient artifact from a time long forgotten. The very fabric of space around it seemed to warp and twist. It was as if the laws of the universe were bending to something far older and far more powerful than anything humanity had ever known. Finally, the ship's systems came back online. The crew exhaled in relief, but the relief was short-lived. The object ahead began to shimmer, its surface shifting in ways that defied logic. Dr. Carter could feel the weight of history bearing down on them. The transmission had led them here for a reason, but what was it? "We need to make contact," Dr. Carter said, her voice low but determined. "This is the moment we've been waiting for." Leo nodded, his face grim. "Are we ready for this?" No one could answer that question. The truth they sought was just beyond their reach, hidden behind layers of darkness and ancient secrets. The galaxy had laughed at humanity, thinking them ignorant, but now humanity was standing at the very edge of that darkness, prepared to speak the language no one had dared to speak before. The ship moved closer, the massive object looming ever larger in the view screen. Whatever it was, it held the answers to the galaxy's deepest mysteries, and perhaps to humanity's future. The countdown had begun. Whatever lay beyond that veil would change everything. This transmission, it's not just telling us to return something. It's urging us to do something. The word return, it's a command. It's asking us to give them something we don't fully understand yet. Dr. Carter turned to face him, her mind racing. She had thought the language was just a way to communicate with an ancient race. But now, Leo's words struck a chord. This wasn't just a simple transmission. It was a plea, a demand. "What do we do now?" Anna asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We follow the message," Dr. Carter replied, her decision clear. "We decode it completely. We find out what it's asking for." The team worked through the night, poring over the symbols. But the deeper they went, the more they realized how little they truly knew. The artifact was far beyond anything they had ever encountered. It seemed to be alive, pulsating with an energy that was both terrifying and fascinating. It was as if it was guiding them, showing them the path to the truth. Then, as the sun began to rise, Dr. Carter saw something that made her stop in her tracks. The symbols on the screen began to shift once more, aligning to form an image of the galaxy. But there was something else. At the center of the galaxy, there was a dark spot, a place where the stars seemed to vanish into nothingness. "That's..." Leo started, his voice full of awe. "That's where we have to go. The coordinates are hidden there." Dr. Carter's heart skipped a beat. The coordinates were leading them to a place no one had ever seen, a region of space where even light seemed to disappear. It was a place where the galaxy's history had been sealed away, a place where the ancient civilization had hidden their most dangerous secrets. "We need to prepare," Dr. Carter said, her voice grim. "This isn't just a journey through space. It's a journey into the unknown." As the team began to organize their findings, they realized how little they truly knew. The transmission was just the beginning. Whatever they were about to uncover would change everything. They were on the verge of discovering something so profound that it could either save humanity or lead to its destruction. But as they prepared for the unknown, Dr. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The transmission had been sent with such precision, such force. It was as if the aliens had been waiting for humanity to unlock the door. The galaxy had laughed at them for so long, mocking their primitive technology and limited understanding. Now, humanity had the keys to something far greater, a language that the galaxy feared. The forbidden tongue of the ancestors had awakened something that could never be undone. "We're not just unlocking their secrets," Dr. Carter murmured to herself, a chill running down her spine. "We're waking them up." The weight of her words hung in the air, and the team fell silent. Each of them understood the gravity of what they were about to do. There was no turning back now. And as Dr. Carter stared at the coordinates, a sense of dread washed over her. She had always been a scientist, dedicated to discovery. But now she wasn't sure if they were ready to face the consequences of their curiosity. The truth was closer than ever before, and humanity's place in the galaxy was about to be rewritten. The ship's engines hummed steadily, a rhythmic sound that filled the silence of the crew's quarters. They were now well on their way to the coordinates hidden within the transmission. But with each passing hour, the uncertainty among the team grew. The darkness of space beyond the ship's hull seemed to stretch on forever, an endless void that held untold secrets and dangers. As they neared their destination, the fear among them began to feel more tangible, as though something was out there waiting. Dr. Carter stood by the observation window, staring into the black expanse. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The coordinates had led them here, right to the edge of the galaxy, to a place that was supposed to be uncharted, unreachable. And yet, the transmission had known exactly where to direct them. "Dr. Carter, we're approaching the coordinates," Leo's voice came over the intercom, breaking her concentration. "Understood," she replied, turning away from the window. She quickly made her way to the command center, where her team was already monitoring the ship's approach. The crew had already gone through the standard procedures, but everyone knew that what lay ahead wasn't just another mission. This was a journey into the unknown, one that could forever alter humanity's future. "We did not ask to be awakened, But now that you have found us, there is no turning back. The universe has chosen you, and you will carry the weight of the past. You are the heirs to our legacy, whether you are ready or not." Dr. Carter's heart skipped a beat. They were the heirs? What did that even mean? Before she could ask more, the entire ship vibrated, and the walls seemed to shimmer. The symbols on the screens changed again, this time revealing an image. An ancient star map, dotted with countless planets. But one of the planets stood out above the rest, glowing with an eerie light. "That is where you must go," the voice continued. "The final chapter of your story begins there. You will find the answers you seek. But be warned, some truths are more dangerous than you can imagine." Suddenly, the screen went blank. The ship was now completely silent. The only sound left was the hum of the energy, echoing from the artifact in front of them. The crew was stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. We have to go there, don't we?" Anna said quietly, her voice trembling. Dr. Carter took a deep breath. She had always known that humanity's journey into the stars would be fraught with danger, but this was something else entirely. They were being pulled into a greater conflict, one they hadn't even begun to understand. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "We have no choice, but we do it together. Whatever happens, we face it as one." The crew nodded in unison, knowing that they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: they would not be the same people who had entered the unknown. The ship's systems flickered back to life, now fully under the control of the ancient artifact. The map that had appeared on the screen began to guide them toward the planet that held the answers they sought, the planet that held the key to everything. As the ship moved forward, Dr. Carter looked at the stars outside the viewport. They were no longer the same stars she had seen when they first set out. Now, they felt like the watchful eyes of something much greater, waiting for them to unlock the secrets of the universe. And so, with their mission set, they began their final journey into the heart of the unknown. The fate of humanity, and perhaps the galaxy itself, rested in their hands.